Hello, my name is Georgia Hocking. My tutor's name is Elizabeth Bryant, and I am in the Wednesday 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. workshop. I conducted my professional experience in a remote mining town. The school I was placed in was a co-ed secondary state school. The student body was made up of a wide variety of cultural and socio-economic backgrounds. Approximately 38% of the student population identified as being Indigenous. The school was split into two campuses, junior, grades 7 to 9, and senior, 10 to 12. I was located in the junior campus. For my learning intervention, I chose the Year 7 maths class I was teaching at the time. So, most students were 12 years old. The class was made up of 20 students, most of whom were sitting at around a C or B level. The unit for the term was on measurement and geometry, in particular, using units of measurement. The focus was on extending students' knowledge of perimeter from Year 5, in addition to the following Year 7 content descriptors. 2, establish the formula of areas of rectangles, triangles, and parallelograms, and use these in problem solving. And calculate volumes of rectangular prisms. The key learning intention of my intervention was for students to be able to recall the relevant formulas to find the area and perimeter of shapes, as well as apply their knowledge to solve authentic problems. A diagnostic assessment was first carried out in the form of a pre-test, which to the students I referred to as a quiz. For my quiz, I handed a sheet of paper to each student that included 6 questions, 4 fluency and understanding, and 2 problem solving. The students completed this assessment individually in silence. When students had finished, they raised their hand and I collected their quiz. I then took the quizzes home that evening for marking. I created a spreadsheet with the results as shown. The spreadsheet is color-coded, and the code is displayed on the screen. As demonstrated by these results, overall, the students did not perform very well on this diagnostic assessment. When marking the assessment, I found that a high proportion of students struggled to recall the correct formulas for the area and perimeter of shapes. Many students confuse the formulas, for example, using the area formula of a rectangle to find its perimeter. As shown, the students did not make much progress on the problem-solving questions 5 and 6. This would have been due to them not having the sufficient foundational knowledge to apply. I used the data gathered from the diagnostic assessment to inform my teaching practice, carrying out a learning intervention in the following lesson. The first part of my learning intervention involved a match-up activity. Prior to the lesson, I printed and cut out 20 copies of the sheet displayed on the screen. I provided a bundle to each student, and their task was to match up each formula, such as 4L, to what the formula is used for, that is, perimeter of a square. I designed this particular activity due to students struggling on the quiz to recall which area or perimeter formula needed to be used on the relevant shape. According to Catapano, matching games teach visual perception skills, emphasize the concept of pairs and patterns, and develop memory and attention to detail. Although each student had their own individual match-up set, I encouraged them to complete it with their peers in their table groups. I encourage this because group work has positive effects on mathematics learning. This is because it provides students with the opportunity to ask questions and discuss opinions with their peers. My supervising teacher had the students arranged in a particular seating plan where a mixture of grade levels was sitting at each table. So, by giving students the group activity, students who had better understanding of the content could support those who didn't. Once students had finished the matchup activity, I gave them time to glue it in their books, so they could always have it to refer back to, which would be particularly useful when they went to start their assignments the following week. The second part of my learning intervention involved answering the 2 problem-solving questions from the pre-test as a class. However, this was not simply done through direct instruction to the class. It was a whole class discussion. This is because whole class discussions initiate more student engagement, which is a driver of student learning. I provided the class with prompts and open-ended questions, and students raised their hand to provide me with the answers. I also called on students by pulling their names out of a jar. This is a technique my supervising teacher had used with them many times previously. Following my learning intervention, I administered a post-test, Quiz 2. A post-test is a common formative assessment strategy. Formative assessment provides information about what the student knows, understands, and can do, and it results in feedback to improve future learning. A post-test should differ from the items in the pre-test, but be aligned to the same outcomes. Hence, the second quiz included the same questions, but with different numbers. By doing this, I was able to clearly see the impact I made on students' learning. I collated the results of the second quiz in the same format as I did for the first. As you can see, there is much more green and yellow evident in the results of Quiz 2, demonstrating an improvement in students' learning. However, it is evident that in these results that students still struggled to apply their understanding to problem-solving questions 5 and 6. Evidence of improvement can also be seen through student A's quizzes. As you can see in the first quiz, for question 1, student A used the area formula to find the perimeter of a rectangle. And in question 2, they used the perimeter formula of a square to find its area. Student A also used the area formula for a parallelogram for question 5, which required the formula for the perimeter of a rectangle. Clearly, this student was having trouble recalling the correct formulas to use. However, student A showed significant improvement in their understanding in quiz 2, as they answered all the questions correctly. I returned students their second quizzes once I had marked them, and I had made notes on students' quizzes who were still struggling. Providing feedback to students is very important. In fact, included under the Australian Professional Standards for Teachers is provide feedback to students on their learning. In future placements, I will narrow down my key learning intervention to encompass 1 or 2 topics instead of numerous topics. For example, instead of assessing students on their knowledge of all shapes, maybe just focusing on 1 or 2 shapes. I believe this would make my learning experience more meaningful and effective. By focusing on 1 or 2 shapes, this will give me the opportunity to possibly be more creative in the learning intervention I carry out, further enhancing students' engagement. Also in future placements, I will provide more individual feedback to students. Feedback is a key element in formative assessment. Although I return students' second quiz back to them, I think it would have been very valuable to provide students more detailed feedback and even speak to students individually about how they went. This was a technique I observed my supervising teacher doing in my final week of placement in her Year 8 maths class. Here are my references for this showcase, and thank you for listening.